Hey everyone. So today I've got a topic that seems to have been discussed a little bit recently. Specifically, I'm talking about some podcasts as well as some conversations that I personally have had with a few people. The old debate between ARF versus scratch build. It's seemingly a never-ending battle, right? I feel like this is a difficult subject to address because on the one hand, you have a strong tradition in traditional balsa scratch building, which I completely respect and obviously participate in. On the other hand, you have a strong population of people that want that sense of scale, but they can't exactly do or are not they don't really want to. That's not really their primary focus. They want to focus on flying. And I understand both sides. Having purchased a couple of ARFs over the years, I fly a couple of ARFs. I fly a Top Flight P6E Hawk. It's a giant scale version. I've had the Top Flight Texan, and I've had a number of other kits over the years that are just ARFs that I use for bashing around something to fly while I'm building. And it's how do I go about this? There's the mindset that if you build an ARF, you're not a builder, and the people that scratch build kind of they frown upon these ARFs, and they think that they're a bane to their existence. Well, I want to give you a little bit of context first before I discuss this any further. In the beginning, as it were, we had the plans. You had published plans, or a friend drew up plans, and you used those plans to transfer. You could use a light acetone to transfer the ink from the plans to balsa, and you cut those out with a knife. Then we graduated to die cut, or as I like to call them, die crush kits, where you have a specific die that is manufactured, and over again it presses out a sheet of ply or balsa or whatever wood, and you would pop those out, sometimes breaking them, most of the time breaking, and then you would build over the plans. Then, more traditionally, what you have today in terms of a kit is a laser cut kit that has high precision. Sometimes you don't even need plans to build them. A great example is Lane's planes. The Cuda, the Norman, you don't even need to put those together over top a set of planes. They just key together because they're engineered in CAD and they fit that well. This being said, as we got from the die cut into the pseudo composite building stage, this is think like 1980s, late 1980s into the 90s. You started having what was called an ARF, almost ready to fly. It's not what we think of an ARF today. The idea was that it was partially assembled and you had a dramatically reduced amount of build time. A great example is something that I have here personally. Okay, so this is an old plane that I started, haven't finished yet. It's called it's an ARF, and it's from a company that is no longer open. It's Dare Design and Engineering. This is of a Focke-Wulf 190, and as you can see, this wing is balsa, and the wingtip is plastic, and that's glued on. Now, when I got this, the leading edge was not applied, and the trailing edge did not have the ailerons cut out, but looking at this end, it's a foam core. So the foam was hot wire cut, and then the balsa was skinned, and that's how you received the wing. So there's all sorts of things that you still had to do. I've still had to put in pockets for my landing gear and my flap servo. Haven't even put in a pocket for my aileron servo, and then you have to figure out how to run. So while it does save a dramatic amount of time, it's still a lot of building. The other thing that you have to also consider is that there is a cost associated with producing a kit. Now, if you go to the Tower Hobby website or even Horizon, I mean, these are, Horizon purchased the Hobbico assets when Hobbico went under recently. This is fairly recent news. I'm assuming you're all caught up to speed on this. And I had a conversation with the branding representatives at Flight Fest, and it was an interesting conversation because you have these wonderful kits. Specifically, we talked about Top Flight. We were talking about my Corsair. The thing about producing kits is there are multiple sources for different parts. So you have someone who produces the wood and someone who produces fiberglass molded parts, if they're there. You have someone who produces plastic, and maybe it's a couple of different, maybe there's a specialist for clear plastic for a canopy, another one for like the cockpit accessories, or maybe another one that does high density that produce the cowl. So for example, some of the Top Flight kits had, like the Texan, my Texan had a fiberglass cowl. The Corsair has a high density plastic cowl. So there's lots of different companies that they work with that they don't necessarily produce the parts in-house. This is also especially true when it comes to metal things like, say, the E-flite servoless retracts. So they work with a machine shop to produce those, and then they supply them to Hobbico, and they are sold under their brand. So what you see, or lack thereof, on the Tower website is Top Flight kits. Okay, the reasons that were given to me was that you have one producer of the wood, one producer of the plastic, and the plastic being, okay, so the plastic has to be molded, right? It has to be molded over top of something. Well, those molds are so old that they would have to build a new one. So these companies, not being paid by Hobbico, are saying, okay, well, Horizon, this is really great that you've bought all this stuff, and we're glad that you're interested in producing more of these kits, but we've got this bill from Hobbico that we're not going to produce any more supply for you until these old bills are paid. And Hobbico is saying, or sorry, Horizon is saying, but that's not our bill. It's not part of the bankruptcy proceedings or merge, whatever you want to call it. It's not their responsibility. So being able to continue to produce these kits, number one, is not viable. Number two, it's not good business practice. And number three, there's newer technologies and there's new mindsets. And I want to go over one of those mindsets with you today. I want to specifically say to you that, you know, I remember attending Warbirds Over Delaware, a big, very prestigious event in 2009. And I remember seeing a gentleman's trailer that he was a very avid scratch builder. And he had a wonderful trailer, toy trailer. And on the side of it was painted with, you know, all sorts of insignias and different brands like Balsa USA, and clearly a very enthusiastic person. And it had a slogan on it: ARFs are for the dogs. Let's think about that for a second. Going from what used to be an ARF to what an ARF is today, an ARF today can be assembled for the average builder in just a few weekends. You're talking about epoxying two wings together, maybe some screws, linkages, installation of electronics. I mean, this is not really hard stuff. let's go back to scratch building. Scratch building is, okay, so you have a design and you are assembling it to design specifications. If you're building it from a kit, then really all you're doing is saving money on the assembly. Maybe not. Recently, I checked Hobby King's website. They have a Spacewalker that I did a sponsored build for. The ARF for that is $74. The kit is currently listed at $110. Okay, so that's not always the case, and I recognize that. But I want to call out that some of these ARFs are in the hundreds of dollars. So, for example, Horizon just came out with their new Hellcat, and that's a $300 ARF. Okay, going back a decade ago, the Top Flight kits started around $300. That was a decade ago. Okay, so you're starting to see where I'm coming from here. The price is not necessarily a justification either. So why all this animosity about a build, a full build versus an ARF? You're saving time, and let's think about this for a second. You have an ARF. Why can't you detail an ARF? I've got this build from decades ago that essentially I have to do all of the covering, I have to do all of the detail work, all of the assembly, and in the end, it's per design specifications, just like when I built the Corsair. The Corsair wing bend, that's all part of the kit. If you buy the ARF, you're getting the exact same wing bend. It's the exact same buildup. It's just that I did it myself. And while there's that satisfaction, if you will, to complete a build by yourself, you also have the problem of time investment. Okay, you get to that field, you line up on the runway, and your knees are just shaking. Now, granted, there's cost associated with that too, but we've gone over this cost issue before. If you go through the Horizon catalog for a Hangar 9 airplane and you add up all the parts that they recommend, or even they don't recommend, and do the math, these are not average park flyer airplanes, okay? If you go down a size to the foamies, you're in a completely different league, a completely different construction style. And yes, it's extremely difficult to modify these airplanes in a detailed way that is, something eye-dropping. Yeah, you can make improvements, but in the end, I personally feel that it's more work than it would be worth to just build something on my own from scratch completely. That being said, let's go back to this notion that an ARF is really a kit that maybe went too far. Okay, so if I get an ARF and I take all the covering off and I say, okay, I'm going to make this airplane my own. I don't want a silver covering. I want it to be blue. Okay. I don't want that cheesy cockpit pilot because it doesn't look real and it's the wrong size. Okay. I don't like the dummy radial supplied, so I can 3D print one. Okay. There's a tail hook that there's not designed into it. Let's add a little bit of foam on the tail because that's easy, and if you screw up, you don't care. And then you can create that fairing for the tail hook. Let's 3D print a tail hook. Okay. See, when you strip off the surface skin, you're open to so many possibilities. It's just like years ago when I would say to people, yeah, foam board's this great thing. It's great for building airplanes once you peel the paper off. So let's go back again. I keep saying that. The idea that you can take an ARF and build an ARF, not assemble an ARF, is something that I personally want to call a barf. And I call it a barf because it's a builder's ARF. Okay, it's different from assembling an ARF. Assembling an ARF is just, you put the pieces together. It's a Lego set. That's perfectly fine. You're going to get a great end result. But to me, obviously, looking at the Corsair and the things that I've done there, I can do those same things on an ARF. I just have to go about it a little bit differently. ARF bashing has been around since ARFs began, but it stems from that culture of scratch building. And what I think I can do is really convince someone that an ARF was a build. And I've been working on setting up a project to demonstrate this. And I think I'm going to be able to prove people wrong. If you doubt me, make a comment below in the comments section, and let's talk about it a little bit. Because once you get to a certain point where you've built something, you can modify anything you want, anything you can imagine. So let's talk about something that is kind of debatable as well. When you learn how to scratch build, you're learning basic building techniques, and that allows you to do certain modifications for scale details. So you learn how things go together, so you understand structure, and by taking out structure, you lose rigidity or strength, or using certain materials that spread out landing loads for landing gear and motor mounts and anti-vibration and all of this stuff. Yeah, I understand that. I really, really do. But kits have not gone away completely. There are a lot of boutique kit sellers now. Balsa USA is a fantastic kit supplier. They recently were on a podcast with Joe Vermillion, was talking about the move toward laser cutting their kits, and they're stepping in the right direction for that. But Balsa USA kits are known for their accuracy, their excellent flyability. A lot of their stuff is quite large. They're usually quarter scale or third scale, but they also have a select few of 1/6 scale, and a couple of sport flyers as well. And they've also done a great YouTube series about how to assemble, walk you through the basics of assembling one of their airplanes. It's on their YouTube channel. It's great. I've watched all of it, and I think it's a fantastic resource for those who want to learn how to build with balsa. Now, moving with that, you can take all of those things that you've learned and you can go to some place like Manzano Laser Works. And they've got a huge selection of a multiple variety of shapes, sizes, styles of building, designers, vintages, eras. You name it, it's there. Everything from civilian aircraft to World War II, World War I, Golden Age, early age. Everything is there under Manzano, and you can find stuff. I personally have built the GB. I used the McKellar GBZ that's available on Manzano Laser. Fantastic kit. It was great. Built it in, 2 months, 3 months? I want to say that some of the other laser cutting companies can have a little bit of lead time, but these are the two prevalent ones that I personally know of and can vet for because I've purchased from them, or know someone who has purchased from them, or I've watched a build who's built one of those, and everything just falls together with those. So you can take the basics of building a simple model and translate it to something more complicated. Obviously, there's more time investment. So the means are still there for you to approach the subject. It's not like it's gone away. It's just a little less accessible. You can still buy kits off of eBay, that's fine, but you don't necessarily know the quality that the kit is in. You can perfectly well go on eBay and buy a Carl Goldberg model, but you don't know how that model has sat in a box in a basement. It's moist. Maybe it's been in a smoker's home. You just don't know what kind of quality you're getting. Even if it says that it's never been opened, it's just questionable. So you take that kind of a risk purchasing from eBay or even finding something on Craigslist or an estate sale. So just be forewarned and try to know what you're getting into. So there's all of these different things that have been rolling around in my head, and I want to get back to this whole barf issue. I really think this is something that needs to change. I think that the hating on people that try to do something and bash on their ARF, I think that the people who do that are childish and uninformed and too anti-competitive to have their minds open to what's really possible, what are the benefits, and they haven't really had an open mind about it. And I think that I'm going to try to follow the cue that Keith Sparks has done. If you don't know who Keith Sparks is, Park Flyer Plastics, quarter scale, all foam, P40 Warhawk. Carl's built one, and let me just say, an airplane of this class usually is in the 35-pound-ish range. Carl's is like 22. It's a flying kite. It flies beautifully, and it's all foam. And he has changed the way people think about composite building for a really, really fantastic way. He's got a great book. I highly recommend it. It's called Building with Foam. You can get it on Amazon. Go to a store, buy it. It's 20 bucks. Totally worth having on your shelf. And moving on to what I want to model is I want to change people's minds about this ARF thing. I want to barf the crap out of something. And I really think you're going to like what I've got lined up. Not going to reveal it just yet. I'm going to let things settle and fester. I want this discussion to continue. I want you to try to change my mind, because this is a mentality that I at one point had too. And slowly, since this conversation with the Horizon guys has come into my mind, I've talked with other people. I've talked with beginners about, if you were to approach balsa, what would you want to do? And everything is still there. Everything that we know and love about this hobby in relation to balsa building is still there, still accessible, and it's perfectly possible. But I want people to change their minds and change it for the better about what an ARF can be. Yeah, it could be a steaming pile of poo on the ground, but it can be more. It can truly be a flying work of art. So with those thoughts, I'm going to leave you. I've rambled on long enough. Thank you so much for sticking with me through the end of this video. I know it's long, but it's an important topic that I felt that I should try to discuss on camera, because I want to expose it to more people. I want people to consider it more. And I think once we get past a certain point, and if I really in the end prove people wrong, then I will have accomplished my goal. And with that, thank you for visiting my workshop, and I'm Joshua Orchard. Barf. Barf. Barf.